Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for everybody for taking the time to join us today. It's great to see so many people and from so many different areas across the region. My name's Geraldine. I'm an AHP project manager. I'm working in Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West, as we are currently known, ICB. And this webinar is on our Practice Educator Assistant Pilot, or as we like to affectionately refer to it as our P-Pilot. So I'm supported on the call today by some colleagues. So I just wanted to quickly go around and do some introductions, and then you'll get to meet everybody properly a little bit more later on as well. So Ali, you're right in the middle of my screen. Shall we start with you?
Thank you, Geraldine. I'm Ali Biddle.
Oh, was Ali frozen for everybody?
Yes.
Yep. Pilot.
Yeah.
Oh, so sorry, Ali, you completely froze just as you started.
Shall I go again?
Please, yeah.
Okay, I'll do it quicker. I'm Ali. I'm a speech and language therapist and a lecturer in speech and language therapy, and I'm the clinical placement coordinator for speech and language therapy. And I was part of the P pilot project. We provided the first year master's speech and language therapy students. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Sophie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a speech and language therapy student at Reading University, and I'm currently in my second year of the master's course.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Abby?
Hi, I'm Abby. Like Sophie, I'm in my second year of this master's course, and I was, of course, part of this P project back in May.
Brilliant, thank you. If I hand over to Gina.
Hi, I'm Gina Wright, and I'm a speech and language therapy assistant, and I was a P in the beginning of this year, and I work for Buckinghamshire Speech and Language Therapy, Children and Young People's Therapy.
Thanks so much, Gina. And Melissa.
Hi everyone, I'm Melissa. I'm one of the speech and language therapy leads here at Bucks. I work with Gina and was also one of the practice educators on this P pilot.
Brilliant, fantastic. So the plan for this webinar is I'll be sharing a presentation just so you can hear a little bit about the background of the pilot, our design and what we learned from it. And then we're going to hear from our fantastic students, Sophie and Abby, and then from Gina, who, like she mentioned, was one of our Ps. And then we will move to a panel discussion, so a bit of a Q&A. So if you do have any questions that come up while the presenters are speaking, then please do pop them in the chat. And then I will come back to those when we are in the panel section of the session. And I'm just going to share my screen. Perfect. Can everybody see that okay? Some thumbs up. Great. Perfect. Thank you so much. Brilliant. So a bit of background on the P pilot then. So my primary focus has been on implementing the Educator career framework across Bob. For those of you that aren't familiar with the framework, I did send around a copy yesterday, but unfortunately for those of you that have RSVP'd today, you wouldn't have received that, but I am happy to send that out again later on. The framework is really a fantastic resource for anybody that is looking to develop the education pillar of their practice. And for those of you that are in leadership or management positions, a really useful tool to look at how you can support the development of your teams and services. So I've been running multiple projects. Each project has been aligned to a different career stage within the framework. And the framework covers everything from our students and learners to our consultant level and then into our academic educators. And this P pilot was all about our support workers and giving them an opportunity to develop the education pillar of their practice. So the premise of this model is that an experienced support worker, so for this pilot, it was our speech and language therapy assistants, are upskilled to become practice educator assistants. They are then buddied or partnered with or team up with a registered clinician, and it's that partnership that then can support student or students plural when they are out on placement. Quickly here, just a flag about the HCPC regulations. So I am aware that the support workers can't become a full practice educator because they're obviously not registered, but they can become practice educator assistants and form part of the students' practice education team. So that's the model that we have developed here. So as my primary focus has been on an opportunity for our support workers, what we wanted to do was see whether with this placement model we could also alleviate some of the pressure on our therapists. We know that there's huge demand on our AHP workforce in terms of those clinical pressures, but equally we know that we need to continue supporting our students and our learners. We know that there's a shortage of placement offers, and that particularly impacts our smaller professions like our speechies. And so we wanted to see whether this model would also facilitate placement expansion. We know that similar models have worked in other areas as well. So when I came into this post just over a year ago, one of the first things that I started to do was a bit of a scoping exercise. So met with the local universities to get a sense of, did we think this model could work? Would it work with certain professions but not others? And then in terms of the logistics of when students were coming out on placements, could we deliver this model in time? And everything just really aligned for our speech therapists. So we had fantastic engagement from the University of Reading, but also from our speech therapists kind of across our organisation. So we moved quite quickly and set up a working group, which was comprised of the University of Reading. And then we had 3 pilot sites. So we had Buckinghamshire Healthcare, Oxford Healthcare and Berkshire Healthcare. And then in terms of roles within the working group, we had representation from our educators, from team leads, professional development leads, our SLTAs when they had time, and also our lecturers and staff from the placement team at the University of Reading. So we had about 6 months to get the model up and running, and we wanted to make sure that we were delivering something that was really robust. So at our peak, we were meeting every fortnight. So as I've touched on briefly, our aims for the pilot were to provide an opportunity for our AHP support workers to develop the education pillar of their practice through assuming a more formal role in students' practice-based learning, and to see whether we could expand placement capacity through using our support workforce, thereby enabling our practice educators to host the students whilst maintaining their regular responsibilities. So in terms of design, I've mentioned that we had the 3 pilot sites. We had 5 SLTAs that we upskilled to become practice educator assistants, so our PEs. For their involvement in the pilot, they needed to have expressed an interest in supporting students and learners, but they also needed to have a team manager or a team lead or equivalent that was in agreement that they had kind of the knowledge and the skills and the ability to support students out on practice, but also that the team had the capacity to support the students on placement. So that meant that they needed capacity both with the educator assistant, but also with the educator. And we were actually able to create, I believe, 4 new placements from the 5 SLTAs that we upskilled. In terms of the students involved in the placement, so obviously Reading would have led on the allocation of the students into the pilot, but we did agree as a working group that we would provisionally roll this out with students that had a limited background in healthcare prior to enrolling on their university programmes. For the SLTAs and their training, so they all attended practice educator training, the same training that we ask our therapists to attend, and that was delivered by the University of Reading. And we also asked them to complete a supporting AHP students e-learning package, which is available on eLearning for Health. That's free, you just need to set up an account to register. And then we also drafted again, a roles and responsibilities document. Again, I did send that out yesterday, but if you didn't receive a copy, I'm happy to share that. The roles and responsibilities document is really just to very clearly outline what was the definition of a practice educator and what fell under the remit of a P and the kind of separate roles and responsibilities. The document is designed to supplement the handbook that's provided by universities, not to replace the handbook. In terms of evaluation, so we sent out evaluation forms to everybody that was involved, so our students, our therapists and our assistants, and as a working group we met at the midway and the endpoint so that we had kind of complete oversight of the pilot as it was running. And I've also written a slightly lengthy report, so if anybody would like to read that, I'm happy to send that around afterwards as well. Just in terms of applying some additional support, so we're aware that it's a pilot and we just wanted to add kind of an extra buffer in there. So we did hold a virtual induction. Everybody that was part of the pilot was invited to attend in that first week, just so that we could share some background information, let people know what data we were going to be collecting, and just make sure people had key contacts and things like that. We also explored setting up support networks, so one for the students and one for the assistants. I think the students already knew each other really, really well, so that wasn't really needed. And I think the SLTA one didn't really take off. We also hosted weekly virtual drop-in sessions. So myself and somebody from the University of Reading was available for anybody involved in the pilot to drop in if they had concerns specific to the pilot. Any other kind of normal placement concerns would have followed the kind of usual escalation route. We had absolutely nobody attend those drop-in sessions, which I'm taking as a positive. So I sat in a virtual room by myself for an hour each week. Sorry, I'm just going to skip these next couple of slides. So in terms of results then, so we've broken these down into each of the different roles within the pilot. So this is the feedback that we received from the assistants or our Ps. I kind of swap interchangeably between the two. So we asked our Ps why they wanted to get involved in the pilot, and we had two really clear themes here. So the first one being that it offered an opportunity for their professional development, and secondly, that they all had a huge interest in supporting students and learners, and they really wanted to be involved in the development of the next generation of therapists. So we asked them to feedback on their placement experience. So we asked whether they felt that having the student placement did provide them with opportunities to develop their own knowledge and skills, whether they enjoyed the experience and found it rewarding, whether they fully understood the roles and responsibilities of both the educator and the P, and whether they felt that they had a sufficient level of support available throughout the pilot. And all of our Ps responded that they either agreed or strongly agreed with those statements. In terms of placement challenges from the SLTA perspective, we only had one piece of feedback, but really useful. So this was from an SLTA that was actually working part-time. And so essentially the kind of extra responsibilities of supporting the student meant that they were then working beyond their hours. They didn't feel that that was a concern, but obviously from our perspective, it would be. So a point of kind of learning for us is looking at how we can better support our support workforce that are working part-time so that they can still get involved in these development opportunities, but without encroaching into their personal time. And then from an assistant perspective on the strengths of the model, they felt that this type of placement model offered the students a broader experience in terms of their learning. So they got to do more and see more. They felt that it was a really good opportunity for themselves as assistants to showcase the role of the SLT assistant and everything that they kind of offer and contribute to the team. And that there was a lot of two-way learning going on. So the students were learning from the assistants and the assistants were learning from the students, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm just going to skip over this slide. So this area of improvement is actually specific to this P individually, not to the pilot. But if you wanted to read it, I will share the slides after. So in terms of replicating the model, we asked the assistants if they would consider supporting this model again in the future and if they would recommend it to colleagues, and everybody answered yes. And then again, I won't read through all of this because I will share the slides, but just a useful kind of some feedback again in the additional comments was around the SLTAs wanting to support students, but feeling that it was something that they could only do once a year. So just something for us to kind of bear in mind if we're placement mapping across teams. So in summary then, for our SLTAs and our Ps, so they identified their own professional development and supporting the development of students as their primary motives for wanting to participate in this pilot. And they all agreed or strongly agreed that being involved in the pilot did support their professional development and they found it a rewarding experience. They felt that the biggest strength of the model was that it gave students a wider set of learning experiences, and they all agreed that they would support this model again in the future. They rated the overall placement experience as a 4.5 out of 5. So for our therapists and our practice educators, We asked them the same 4 statements about their placement experience, and they all agreed or strongly agreed, so same as the assistants, although they weighted it a little bit more towards strongly agree. Excuse me. So we asked the therapists about their the enablers and barriers and kind of strengths and weaknesses of this placement model. And the feedback really aligned with the feedback that we got from our assistants. So in terms of the enablers, specifically related to the assistants, there was a consensus that it gave the assistants more autonomy and an opportunity to develop themselves professionally. In terms of the students, the feedback was consistent that they felt the students got a broader experience, got to learn from the assistants, and crucially learn and understand the role of the SLTA. And they also felt that having the assistant there offered the student a different level of support. And in terms of the therapists themselves, consistently received feedback that it reduced the stress of taking the student out on placement. It gave them more capacity so they could kind of maintain their clinical duties, because obviously the student was spending time with the P, but also that the P took some responsibility for managing timetables and making sure the student had visits, etc. In terms of some of the challenges and things to reflect on, so unfortunately one of our SLTAs went sick quite early on in the process, so that placement had to switch to a more traditional model, so obviously the educator then needed to kind of fully step in. Just to bear in mind that if we've got multiple educators and assistants, that we just need to ensure that we've got really strong communication and coordination between all of those, and just some feedback around making sure that in terms of that clinical thinking and that critical reasoning, that's built in and there's protected time for that with the student, because that's probably going to fall outside the scope of our Ps. So again, we asked them whether they would support this placement model in the future and if they would recommend this to colleagues, and everybody said yes. And again, won't go through all of the feedback, but a kind of point to note here is that all of the students that came out on placement were very strong. So there were no concerns about struggling students or students at risk of failing, and nothing to do around adjustments or anything like that. So I think all of those things would sit out of the scope of practice of a P anyway, but it's something worth bearing in mind, and actually that we probably still need to upskill our Ps in that, even though they wouldn't be directly involved. So in summary, for our therapists and our practice educators, all of the therapists agreed that working alongside an assistant was beneficial for them. It reduced the demands on their time and offered the students more support, and the students had greater exposure to therapy sessions. The biggest challenge being the SLTA sickness and then the impact this then has on the therapists. Therapists identified the strengths of the model as greater learning experiences for students, but particularly, and this is really crucial, in understanding and valuing the role of our therapy assistants, and the second kind of strength around supporting that professional development for our assistants. All the therapists reported that they would consider supporting this model again in the future and would recommend it to their colleagues, and the therapists rated this placement experience as 4.75 out of 5. And then we're on to our students. So on their learning experience, we asked the students if they were satisfied about the placement, allowing them to develop their competencies, and they were all somewhat satisfied or very satisfied. And we asked whether they thought there were any kind of knowledge or potential learning areas that were missed from the placement. One person did say yes, but this was actually specifically around their eating, drinking and swallowing competencies, and that's because it wasn't covered in the nature of that placement, so it wasn't due to a missed learning opportunity by either the therapist or the assistant. So we asked whether they felt that working alongside a speech and language therapy assistant gave them access to additional learning opportunities, and they all agreed or strongly agreed. And then in terms of their placement experience, we asked whether they were able to achieve their learning objectives and competencies, whether it was beneficial to have access to both a practice educator and a P, whether they were satisfied with the level of support that they got from both, whether they had a clear understanding of the roles and responsibilities of both, and whether they received enough information about the pilot prior to starting. And they all agreed, but actually they were more heavily weighted towards strongly agreeing. I'm not going to cover this slide, but we do have the students here, so if you want to hear about the best learning on the placement, please do ask. So feedback on the strengths of the model from the student perspective, completely aligned with what we got from the assistants and the therapists, which is really fantastic. They just felt that working alongside both roles gave them a much more kind of rounded view of the service, that they had more opportunity to get involved and see different things, and that it was really valuable to see what the role of the SLTA was, because they will be working alongside assistants when they qualify, and learning about the interactions between the therapist and the assistants. And areas for improvement. So this is just related to a bit of the communication and coordination, I think, between having kind of multiple educators and Ps, just some advice on some practical things that could be done next time. So in summary for the students, there is a bit of a caveat here, which I'm going to come back to. So not all of the students completed the survey, and one student submitted some written feedback, but based on what we got from the survey, so all the students that completed it agreed or strongly agreed that having a practice educator and a P was beneficial to their learning, and that working alongside the assistants gave them access to additional learning opportunities. They all reported that this placement model did not reduce or negatively impact their learning or their ability to achieve their competencies. They all felt that the biggest strength of this model was the opportunity to learn the role of the SLTA and learn from the SLTA. And they were all highly likely to recommend this placement model to their students, and they gave their overall placement experience a rating of 4.75 out of 5. So just to come back to the caveat, we had one student who was unable to fully participate in the pilot because their SLTA went off sick kind of right at the beginning. And interestingly, the feedback we got from this student was very, very different to the feedback that we got from the students that were able to fully participate. And so it just brought up a few points for reflection, really. So I think just really for us highlighted the importance of ensuring that all of the students really had a clear understanding of the placement model, and the roles and responsibilities of both the practice educator and the P, and that without that first-hand experience, there can still be some assumptions about the level of learning that our support workers are able to provide to students, and that for me just highlighted this ongoing need for a bit of a culture shift that recognises don't know if you just put yourself on mute, sorry, that recognises the value and contributions of our support workforce and everything that they can bring to our students, particularly when they're out on placement. So I just wanted to kind of close with a couple of quotes that we received from the students as part of their feedback. So I thought it ran very smoothly, and I got just as much learning from the SLT as the SLTA. The SLTA allowed me to see the delivery of therapy and not just assessments, which is something I wouldn't have gotten to see if I was just shadowing the SLT due to the way the trust operates. I found the most valuable part of the placement was having an SLT and SLTAs as practice educators, as it showed me how they work together and gave me a range of opportunities to observe and run sessions. I received lots of useful feedback all throughout my placement from all of my Ps. It's fantastic feedback. And just in summary, please ignore the excessive amount of writing on this slide. So essentially, we were able to achieve the objectives of this pilot, and the pilot we feel has been really successful. So we feel that this is an effective and practical way and a sustainable way to expand our placement capacity, but really importantly, give an opportunity for our support workers to develop the education pillar of their practice. I do appreciate there are some restrictions on this pilot, so we did only take first placement speech and language therapy students. So moving forward, we would want to expand this to consider students from different cohort levels, looking at our other AHP professions, certainly scope to expand it beyond our speeches, and then to involve our T-level students as well. And just kind of further points for reflection from us, just being mindful about our support workforce that works part-time, and whether we need to establish some shared competencies for support workers that do have an interest in getting involved in practice-based learning. And I think that's everything from me. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and everybody's back, which is great. And what I'm going to do is just hand over to Gina, and I'm just going to ask Gina to share her experience of being a P. Thanks, Gina.
Thank you, Geraldine. So as I said earlier, I'm Gina Wright. I'm a speech and language therapy assistant, and I've been an assistant for 25 years. So I have quite a lot of experience working for children and young people's therapies, and I specifically work in the early years complex needs team. I wanted to be a peer educator assistant because I have a kind of a role within the service as a mentor for my peers. And I felt that this was a really good way of extending and my experience and my knowledge of mentoring. So I've kind of written down in sort of groups of things that I wanted to share with you. And I wanted to talk initially about the preparation, if you like, and the online training that is provided was really good, and I learned a lot from that. I made a lot of notes, and they were actually really useful to look back on to remind myself as I went through the PEA programme. And the roles and responsibilities document was really clear as well, and I felt that this was really helpful for me to understand exactly, you know, where the lines were, if you like, from what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. And I did attend the University of Reading sort of global peer educator training, and my colleague and I weren't prepared for it to be everybody all at once, all in one go. So once we'd got our heads around the fact that we should be there with other speech therapists who had done this loads, and it wasn't just for assistants, it was really quite helpful. We did learn a lot, but I think preparation of what to expect might have been helpful in the initial stages of taking part in that. So there were some things that really helped actually going forward, and one of them was that the speech therapist who supported us had already been a peer educator, so she had experience of this. And I just feel that I should mention that I shared this role with another speech and language therapy assistant who is also very experienced working in early years complex needs and early years mainstream, as both of us work part-time. And we had frequent meetings between the three of us, so that we were really clear on what we were offering the student, and we all knew what each other was doing, and so that we would be able to give the timetable with confidence that it would happen, and that she would actually know what she was doing as well, so that she would go into this being confident as well. I will say that the drop-in sessions where Geraldine sat on her own for an hour, emotionally, it was really great to know they were there, even though I didn't need them, which was brilliant. But actually, the opportunity to have that, to be able to go into if you needed something, was really quite reassuring. So thank you for that, Geraldine. And I think the other thing that was really helped, if you like, from the whole project was that there was a really good rapport between the peer educator, speech and language therapist, and my colleague as an assistant as well. And but also with the student, we built a really good relationship with her, and I feel like the four of us became a team, which I felt was really important from the point of view of us all getting the most out of it. So there are a few things that I felt were sort of value added for a student working with an assistant in addition to a speech therapist. And I think one of the most important things for me, having worked with many therapists over many years now, is that it gave really good experience of skill mixing. And I've had experiences of working with therapists who don't have that experience, and really you are trying to if you like, educate them into what, you know, assistants can offer and different models of working. And I think to come into your practice with that experience already can only be a benefit. Speech and language therapists work with lots of speech and language therapy assistants rather, work with lots of speech and language therapists. And so we see different styles, and there are different styles of language program, and it gave an opportunity to talk to the student about sort of the different things that we see with the therapists that we work with, to give them a broader overview, if you like, of the experience that we have. And we talked about how programs look different, even though it's kind of for the same cohort, and the different therapist approach. Also, we see lots and lots of children, unlike the therapists sometimes, and this gave us the opportunity to really provide quite a lot of therapy experience. And it also allowed us to make sure that if there was something missing from the list, so our student needed to have some EDS hours, so we because we knew other therapists who were working with children who needed EDS, we managed to arrange for a session to get the EDS hours in, even though that wasn't available through the sort of core group, if you like. Additional things as well that we offer as assistants. One was Makaton, and our student was able to take part in a Makaton taster session. And then I led some training on tassels for the service, and she was able to come on that as well. So because I was doing that when she was with me. And so there were sort of opportunities that she may not have been able to engage with, not being with assistants. And I think spreading the load for planning was really actually quite good, because it allowed us to create for her a really sort of diverse and full timetable. So there was a lot going on every week when she came to see us. So benefits for me was it made me reflect on my own practice and my rationale for how I was interpreting and presenting speech language therapy programs, because when you have to explain something to somebody, you really need to have thought about why you're doing something. So it did make me think more deeply. And it made me reflect on how to support the student and to think about what the student will need to participate more successfully, rather than me projecting what I think she needs. I needed to ask her what she needed. And that also made me think about stepping back and giving her space to really develop herself, if you like, with me there in a supporting role, rather than saying, oh, I wouldn't do it that way, I'd do it this way. So, so it really did stretch me as a mentor, if you like, which I really appreciated the opportunity for that. And so sort of my reflections on the whole thing was, for me, this was a really enriching and positive experience. The other thing was I really appreciated the recognition that speech and language therapy assistants can offer their own knowledge and expertise that not only meets the needs for the student, but can also enrich the placement by providing a different perspective. And I suppose my biggest learning was that it is really enriching and enjoyable to be part of the peer educator program, and that lots of speech and language therapists have quite a role to play for the student experience. So when they're going into the workplace, there's something that they can bring with them, if you like, as speech and language therapists. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
No, thank you, Gina. Thank you for that really useful summary. I'm just mindful of time, so I'm going to, and thank you to everybody that's popping questions in the chat. I will pick those up and get them across to the panel shortly. If I could just come to Abby first, if you're happy to share your experiences of the pilot, and then I'll come to Sophie.
Hi, so yes, I'm Abby. I started this placement, Melissa was my speech language therapist, and I also work with Claire, a speech and language therapy assistant. So I spent 10 days on this placement for my first year masters. What I've tried to do is encompass 3 big learning points for me that I took the most away from. The first one, again, which I know Gina has touched on, is understanding the role of a speech and language therapy assistant. That's not something you get to do necessarily on this course or in as much depth as we did, and hopefully they're individuals that we will get to work with within our career that were just really amazing to be able to work with. And in terms of delegating workload, in terms of management, yes, working with the clients, but also for ourselves, being able to work with these speech and language therapy assistants, it was amazing to see how we could effectively collaborate. And again, like Gina said, teamwork. So it's really lovely to be able to, again, gain further knowledge on another professional that we will be working with, and to be able to hopefully qualify with that knowledge as well was fantastic. My second point is how the 2 roles can effectively collaborate. So one thing I picked up incredibly quickly was how well the speech and language therapy assistants knew the clients that we were working with. So they could almost bring that child alive before I even saw the child and give me the strengths and needs. And I had a much more holistic view of that child, being able to work with them, which really, really helped me going forward. And like, again, tailor my therapy sessions so I could gear it more towards the child. And yes, we can do that with speech and language therapist as well. But I think there's so much that we juggle with speech and language therapists, and that could be clinical reasoning and the evidence base. So sometimes it's nice to step back and really kind of look at a client holistically and have time to be able to focus on that. Claire was really a wealth of knowledge for the holistic factors behind each child, which I found incredibly useful. And really is extended professional development, which I know we're really big on this course. And it was amazing to be able to split my focus. So as I touched on a minute ago, when I was working with Melissa, I was able to discuss that clinical reasoning and the therapy planning and the evidence backing. And then when I was with Claire, I could just focus on my delivery. I could focus on even just my interactions with the children. We would have time to talk about that. So I really felt like I got a lot more from both sides. And it was just all round a really fantastic experience, and one that I was very grateful to have, really.
Oh, thank you so much, Abby. Sophie, I'm going to hand over to you.
Hi, so I'm Sophie. I was on placement with one practice educator and two practice educator assistants. One was Gina. It was a 10-day placement spread over 10 weeks, so I was there once a week. Like Abby said, I also found that the experience really helped me understand the role of the SLTA, but we also got to learn about the NHS service in a sort of wider as a wider service in terms of the sort of tiers of care that they provide. Because I was with two very experienced SLTAs, I was able to see a real range of service users, of different settings, and of different therapy approaches. It was also really good because the SLTAs tended to see the same children each week or each time I was with them. So it really gave the opportunity that I could observe a session and then have a go at running one myself, having already got an idea of who the child is and what would work with that child. One of the things I really valued most about having practice educator assistants was that I got the opportunity to go to Stoke Mandeville to do tassels training with Gina. Not only was that really good in that I got a skill of being able to do some tassels, but also I got to see Gina teach the other speech and language therapists, the physiotherapists and the OTs how to do this signing. So not only did I learn a new skill, but I learned how speech and language therapy techniques can actually be used by a range of different professionals. As Gina touched upon earlier as well, my other practice educator assistant, Emma, she also gave me the opportunity to do a Makaton taster session, which again, I found really useful, not only for learning Makaton myself, but I got to see her teach parents as well. So it really showed how the help can be given to families of children with communication needs without the children even having to be there. So overall, although there are obviously some specific things we could only learn with a speech and language therapist, such as standardised assessments, there are loads of things that both SLTAs and SLTs do that you can learn from either of them. So for example, note writing and patient-centred care and professionally communicating with families and other professionals.
Perfect. Thank you, Sophie. And I'll just take a second to just absolutely applaud Ali's clapping. Well deserved. What an impressive presentation from two students. Absolutely, absolutely incredible. Well done. Such articulate feedback. I'm going to move straight to the questions because they're starting to pop up into the chat. And please forgive me, panel. I'm just going to name and shame you as they come in and just see if I can kind of target. But please feel free to deflect. And if anybody else wants to jump in, then please do that. So Melissa, I think this first one will be for yourself and possibly Gina. So a couple of questions around what was the percentage of time that was spent with the SLTA and the SLT? So what was the time split? as I appreciate that students can learn loads from their assistants, but will still need the SLT still need to see them enough to be able to assess them. Are you able to come in there?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. So it may be I answer for my placement and then Gina can answer for hers if it's slightly different. But basically, we over the 10 days, Abby was with Claire, our speech and language therapy assistant, probably about 7 out of those 10 days. And then I did 3 visits, so spent 3 days with the students, myself out in the clinical environment. So we cover schools, and it might have been 4 actually, so we juggled it a little bit, that I made sure that I was with the students when we did assessment as well, so that I oversaw some formal assessment delivery rather than that sitting with Claire. So in terms of kind of out and about we're a community paediatric team, it was that kind of split. But what I did as well as the practice educator was then meet them at the end of every day. So I had weekly contact, but sort of sometimes online with them as a group, either with the pair of students we had or with Claire as well. So I could check in and discuss cases, and they could ask any questions as well to me in case anything came up. And then Claire and I did the so in speech and language therapy, we have a mid-placement review and an end-of-placement review, and we did that together. So we had that touch point as well.
Yeah, my experience was very similar to Melissa's, but I think we did kind of, because there were 3 of us, we kind of did a third each, if you like. But what we tended to do was, certainly for me, at the end of like a day when Sophie was with me, we'd go back to Abbey Place, our base, and then there would be an opportunity to be, often the speech therapist was there, and she could touch base with somebody else and be within that setting, if you like. So we could have chats, or she could talk to the speech therapist, or if Emma was about, then she could talk to Emma as well. So yeah, it was kind of a third, and a third.
Perfect. And just to add to that we did add a kind of a sentence within our roles and responsibilities document to stipulate that there must be a minimum amount of contact time between the educator and the student. So if you wanted to kind of rewrite the document for your own kind of service or teams, then you could obviously amend that to reflect whatever expectations you have about the amount of time needed with each. I think this might be a type of assessment, and this is where my speechy knowledge is going to fail me. Who did the CFAPs? What did that model look like, and who organised the timetabling / tutor visits? I don't know if that's another one maybe for Melissa and Gina.
I don't know the AFP and speeches, I'm not sure.
That was me. That was me. Yeah, it's physio. So we have students for 6 weeks full time, and then at the end of it we do the CPAF, which is their assessment form. So I don't know if your speech and language students get assessed at the end of it, but who does the assessment form?
Yeah, so we call it a mid-placement or end-of-placement review, and it's an assessment form, so a pass-fail. Ali, I'll be able to tell you more about that. So it's that with me as a practice educator for that responsibility to grade it, I guess, almost. But that was in conversation with the practice educator assistant. So we had that 3-way conversation together. As we've said before, these guys were really strong, so it was just really easy it was very obvious that everybody was going to pass, but that responsibility sat with me anyway with that 3-way conversation. And then in speech and language therapy, we also have a kind of point of contact with a clinical tutor as well. Again, we had that conversation all together. It helps fill in the form.
Yeah, we did exactly the same. The peer educator and myself and my other colleague who's an assistant, we did the midterm and the end term, the 3 of us together, and went through the form together. But obviously it's the speech therapist's call to really deliver the verdict, pass or fail.
Perfect. Right, last one from Melissa and Gina, and then I'm coming to you, Ali. So in terms for this model, did it change the student supervision structure? I think you might have kind of briefly checked on that, i.e. was it joint supervision with both the educator and the P, or did the P complete formal supervision? I just want to jump in and think we put another caveat, didn't we, on the roles and responsibilities document about avoiding the P completing formal supervision because of the remit. But I've just answered the question. Sorry, I'll hand over. Getting needy. I'll hand over to Melissa and Gina.
Yeah, I mean, we mostly had joint supervision between myself, the practice educator assistant, and the students together. So the formal way of that contact, and then the very formal sort of mid-placement, end of placement review was always with the three of us, with myself involved. I guess in terms of feedback, sometimes that would come directly from Claire, or sometimes that would come from myself, and so there was kind of always that sort of informal feedback and discussions and clinical discussions, which also sometimes happened separately.
Exactly the same for us as well.
And I think in terms of just aligning with Reading, so it didn't change any of the structures. So then we had that contact with the clinical tutors as we would normally do. So that didn't change anything.
Brilliant. Ali, for you, do you think this model would be appropriate for apprentices too, as they already work as SLTAs, but in the placement they would be in a different clinical area to their usual work setting? I don't know if Melissa, you might want to chip in also.
Yeah. I was thinking about this because I've got an apprentice starting soon, and I think for me, yes, because there's so much value in what speech and language therapy assistants can share, particularly in that first sort of placements where perhaps it isn't your clinical area, so that actually they can share that knowledge and their expertise within that clinical area. So for example, for us, if it's an apprentice coming from adult acute with pediatric community, then I think there's huge amounts, and I can see this model working really, really well. I don't know how easy this model would be as the apprentice kind of goes further through their course and becomes much more towards that sort of registered therapist, particularly with the view that they'll have had that kind of extra experience as a speech and language therapy assistant before. So I'm not sure, but I obviously haven't tested it, but yeah, I would probably, we'd need to think about that, and we'd need to have that a little bit more thought than kind of really really committing to it in this way that we've delivered placement, I think, for later years.
Yeah, I think I would agree with everything that you've said there, Melissa. I mean, I haven't had a chance to sort of think about apprentices sort of further on, but I think the reason why we went with our first year master's students is because it's trying to balance up, when you're training a student, all the evidence-based practice and the sort of professional reflective skills. But they can't sit alone. You can't be a speech and language therapist unless you can actually get in there and know how to communicate, know how to interact. Our SLTAs have such a wealth of knowledge of sort of different activities, sort of techniques. And so to me, that's no different for an apprentice who's in an area that they haven't worked in before, and we're all part of one big multidisciplinary team. So to me, it would be odd to exclude the SLTAs. But like Melissa, further up as they're coming into their training, and it's the same for SLT students. I'm not sure that we would, I think we would still very much want to use SLTAs as part of a practice placement, but finalist students are meant to be far more independent. And again, needing to sort of think this through a little bit more, but it may well be that actually there is less dependency on the practice educator, because the finalist students are beginning to learn the role of sort of leadership and how to work as a SLT with an SLTA. So I think there's different expectations for different stages of training, whether you're an SLT or an apprenticeship sort of SLT. I hope that made sense.
Brilliant, thank you. And one for the group, really. Do the SLTA see different types of patients than the speech therapists?
No, not really.
No.
Because all the patients we see there's always a speech and language therapist who's leading that, treatment. So we see exactly the same. The only difference maybe would be is when we're doing training, Makaton training, because anybody can come to that, but that's not speech therapy. So yeah.
And I would say, just in terms of our service structure, so it's specific for our team, our assistants have more of a focus on delivery of intervention, so blocks of therapy, whereas our SLTs are more kind of assessment reviews and kind of, holding that kind of responsibility. But absolutely, it's the same caseload.
Perfect. That's it for questions in the chat. Are there any more questions that anybody has? Hands up or pop them in the chat. Just give it a minute. Oh, Abigail.
Hi, thank you. In my career, all of the speech and language therapy assistants I've worked with have been a bit like you, Gina, very enthusiastic and happy to take on things. But I'm just wondering, it's probably more a question for the other attendees here working in services, whether they anticipate there could be any pushback from AHP assistants if they're being asked, they're not volunteering, they're being asked to do it. And they're saying, well, it's not in my job description to, be seeing students in this way.
Did anybody want to come in there? That can be the panel or the wider group. If people have got comments, feel free to say.
Quite happy to make a comment on that. I think that's a good point actually, Abigail. Is I volunteered for this because that's the sort of thing that I really enjoy doing, and I think that it's not for everybody. A mentoring role is really not for everybody, and the same goes for speech and language therapists as well. Not every speech and language therapist takes on students because it's not for them. So yeah, I think it would have to be a voluntary thing to be successful, in my view.
I was going to agree with Gina. That's how we've done it, and I think it was, from my point of view, a really nice opportunity to be able to extend their role, but we sort of remain it within their scope of practice. I definitely, I could see that there may be some where there would be pushback because within our service, I don't know whether it's experience of others, the demand is high, and so we're always sort of looking for innovative ways to change things, and that always impacts people and what we're asking people to do. So I'd be very reluctant to kind of add this to another thing that perhaps they weren't anticipating was within their job role when they have been in the job or started the job. So yeah, I'm really glad it was being voluntary.
Thank you. I think Hannah. Yes, Hannah, your hand was up first. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi. Just in response to that, we did an educator forum for our support workers a while ago about supporting students just generally. And there's a leadership domain in, I think, the support worker career framework. So if it was something that they were interested in, that might be looked at within their appraisal or their supervision. If it wanted to encourage them, that might be a way of, kind of that development stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wondered your ratio of qualified to assistants within your team, because our ratio is really low. Like we have like probably 2 whole-time equivalent assistants for like 20 qualified. So I think the support within the assistants, there wouldn't be very many of them. But it sounds like, I don't know if you guys maybe have a higher ratio of assistants.
For us and our team, Gina, we've probably got about 60. We're quite a big team. We're integrated in SLT. I think there may be 60 and maybe 10 assistants. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because early years complex needs seems to have a higher ratio of assistants than other teams actually, and some teams don't have assistants at all, or maybe only one. So yeah, that's a good question, and I think if there are 4 of us in early years complex needs to about maybe 8 yeah, so it's like 1 to 2, so it's quite a high ratio. Yes, and if I was really strapped for time, I would not have volunteered for this, I have to say. But as it happens, it fell in with my areas of interest, and that I felt I had the time to devote to it. So yeah.
Ali, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think there's other opportunities that hopefully people have realised could come from this type of sort of placement provision. So this P placement, there was a big focus on the SLTAs, having an integral part of the placement. But I would just advocate for any student that you have on practice placement, whether it's a 5-week placement, a 10-week placement, sort of whatever. Don't forget that your assistants are very much part of a team. So even if the student spends half a day with the assistant or a day with the assistant, that's still really, really valuable learning for the student and a valuable contribution from the PEA. So it doesn't have to be as sort of intense, for want of a better word, as this model was. What I think that all the feedback from sort of this model is that the assistants feel valued by being involved in practice education. The amount of time that they can spend for each practice placement is going to very much depend on sort of ratio, is going to depend on, whether how much interest the SLTA has got. But I would be hesitant to say, well, just dismiss it out of hand. And I'm not saying that's what anyone's saying. But let's just think how we can, just translate this model into all the different sort of workplaces at different levels. Thanks, Geraldine.
Melissa, did you want to come in on that point there?
I was just triggered a thought there, Ali, that this was slightly different from just asking our assistants to pick up students or help us kind of with placement expansion, because we invested in the time to train them, and hopefully that also added to them feeling valued and us wanting to be able to develop them professionally. These guys are like top of band 4, so we put in some clinical training and upskilling them clinically, but this was a great opportunity for us to sort of extend on that different pillar, as Geraldine said. And I think hopefully that helped sort of encourage and say, look, we are investing time and support to develop you, and that maybe support engagement as well with taking up students. So it's not just, oh gosh, we've got, we really need to take on more students. You're going to need to help us sort of attitude. So hopefully, yeah, it was.
Gina, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to, on the back of what Ali and Melissa said, is that the recognition was really appreciated. Because like I said, I've been doing it 25 years. It was really nice that somebody said, hey, you can, you've got something to offer. And that was a really, really great for all of us who were involved. And yes, thank you for that.
Thanks, Gina. We've got a question in the chat. Were all the sessions clinic based, or were they community visits? I don't know about Oxfordshire and Berkshire either.
So in Bucks, our placement was all in school settings, so we were out and about in community. Gina, were yours home visit? Yours was a mix, I think.
So mine were mostly home visits. So and then I know Sophie went to early years setting with Emma. I think she might have done some clinic work with, so it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag actually. And I think home visits are quite valuable because there's not really that much opportunity generally because it's a whole different area from the point of view of being in somebody's house. So yeah, I think that was quite valuable to have that opportunity as well.
Lovely. So Hannah's just dropped the link into the chat for the e-learning module that our Ps did, and has just asked, did you do something separate or add to it? Yes, they attended the Educator training at the university, and then they completed the module as well. I'm just mindful of the time. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? I'm just going to sit quietly for a minute in case anybody wants to come in. Oh, sorry. Yep, already. Did you have to, apparently I'm struggling to read now, did you have to change the assistant scope of practice to permit student supervision, or were they allowed to supervise students prior to this pilot? Melissa, that might be one for you. Oh, Ali.
So,
Sorry.
Oh no, sorry, my hand up was for
Was an
another
old
point.
hand, sorry.
Yeah. No, it was a new hand for another point.
Oh, another point. Sorry, Melissa, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, we didn't change the scope of practice. I think because of the roles and responsibilities document really supported us in being very clear that the responsibility sat with me in terms of being a practice educator, but as Geraldine said right at the beginning, within that HCPC guidance, they are allowed to be assistants as part of that team to support the students. So that's how we delivered it. Geraldine, you're on mute.
Sorry, getting to the end. Ali, did you want to come in with your point?
It was just a clarification about the training. So I'm sure like a lot of the other trusts, so we do two sort of levels of training. We do training for people who are new to having students on practice placement. So that's the training that the assistants sort of joined in. So they were sort of upskilling like the SLTAs in, learning what it is to, support a student on practice placement. Whereas our SLTs would also do experienced educator training and sort of other sort of training webinars. Thanks.
Thanks, Ali. Are there any other questions? Oh, Sophie's just added. Oh, that's so. Oh, Sophie. Just adding to what was said about the settings. I had the opportunity to be in clinics, do home visits and nursery visits for a really good range. Thanks, Sophie. Any other comments or questions? Just give people a minute in case they're writing in the chat. Brilliant. So just wanted to say a massive thank you for everybody for taking time out of their day to come for the webinar. It's really appreciated. A massive thank you to everybody on the panel, particularly our students. What a phenomenal presentation. I'm just so impressed. And also thank you to our colleagues that couldn't be here today. So everybody at the University of Reading and our pilot sites in Oxfordshire, Berkshire, and of course Buckinghamshire. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the day, rest of the week. Thank you so much for coming. I'll hopefully see you all again very soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Geraldine.